Popey, I'm putting you on the spot this week. We're going to start with trivia.
Okay.
Everybody likes trivia, right?
Who doesn't? I can't wait to go to a trivia night again when I'm allowed to leave my house and go see people.
Boy, let's talk about that for just half a second, eh? 1 year into this mess, and we've talked about it before. March the 11th, 2020, we had just finished broadcasting a game in Guelph. Rangers storm, Kitchener wins 6-5. Greg Morellis has 6 points.
Yep.
And then the world literally came to a stop. I mean, I guess it's still revolving, but everything happening within this big orb is done and has been for a year. It's
crazy,
nuts.
eh? A full year.
Nuts. So the only prize for this particular trivia game is my undying admiration. If you can,
I thought I already had that.
Now you're working on it.
Oh, okay.
It's a long road, pal. You might
Fair.
be making the turn onto that road.
Okay.
Who are the highest scoring brothers in the National Hockey League?
That would be the Gretzky brothers.
You would think so, wouldn't you?
Yes.
The problem with that is that those darn Gretzky brothers were only 2. There was one family that sent 6 kids to the National Hockey League.
The Sutters?
The Sutters, that's right. So the brothers are, of course, Wayne and Brent. And in fact, they held the title for a while because the Sutters hadn't all finished playing yet. But yeah, but Brent had 1 goal and 3 assists for his career. And that was enough to put the Gretzkys in second place all time, thanks to Wayne's 2,857 points. Just crazy.
Is that good?
The Sutters.
Is that good?
The Sutters had just over 2,900 points. And then a bunch of other duos. The Stastnys, Peter and Anton.
Yep.
Just over 2,100 points as a duo. The Sedin twins cement their status as among the league's best. Just over 2,100 points as well. And then Henri and Maurice, the Rocket and the Pocket Rocket. Richard. Those are your top 5. I brought it up, of course, because people tend to default to the Gretzkys, as they should. And, of course, in the past week, since we last had one of these podcasts, Wally, I'm going to say the world's greatest hockey dad, has passed away.
I'm just surprised you had that much time in your day today to go back and do some math.
The funny thing is, this popped into my head on the weekend in listening to Wayne's eulogy of his. And I'm like, this is going to be a nice little piece of trivia for the podcast. And in fact, I thought that the answer was the one you gave. I thought for sure if Brent just got a point somewhere, and I'm pretty sure he did, that would make the Gretzkys the highest. But no, the Sutters are in there, 2,936 points.
I tweeted it out, but I'll say it again. As much as Walter gave to the game through, obviously, Wayne, and through the grassroots in Brantford and across Ontario and across Canada that Walter did, I think his greatest legacy will be how many people in the last week and a half or so have said, "Oh, Walter, I met him blank. Oh, I have a Walter story." Everyone, it seems like, had a Walter story because he would spend countless hours in rinks across Ontario and across Canada. And no matter which rink he went into, everyone there knew who he was. There's Walter Gretzky. Walter Gretzky's here. I saw it in my games, going to watch games, at my brother's games. Walter Gretzky walked into an arena and everyone wanted a picture and everyone wanted to have a conversation. And Walter made sure everybody that wanted to have a conversation and everybody that wanted to take a picture got what they wanted. He was a man of the people, a man of the game, and gave so much back to, I know it's oversaid, but the fabric of our country, really, and the fabric of the game in our country. He's just, it sucked. I'm not going to lie. Everybody had a Walter story. And I think that is his greatest legacy that will live on more so than obviously Wayne.
You said it so well when you talked about Walter making time for everybody, right? And the fact that he made that time without any air about him whatsoever, as in, I know I'm the world's greatest hockey dad. Like he was just Walter. Yep. It was that simple. My very first radio job was in Brantford, Ontario. I did part-time overnight weekends at CKPC AM radio they made us say Brantford. The owner was a very strange man. Anyway, and I always thought it was pretty cool, though. If I'm going somewhere, I'm going to go into the city where Wayne Gretzky was born. also, along with the stories that most of us seem to have, there are pictures, countless pictures, and they were all over social media after we learned of Walter's passing. I saw your picture. What's your Walter story?
That was just at a Siskin's Caledonia Corvair game during the Sutherland Cup. But I had met him previous at my games, like in Brantford tournaments when my brother was playing AAA. He was always at the games, and my parents would always take me over and introduce me, as a young kid. And he always had time. And I just couldn't believe that this guy was sitting there with literally a lineup of people behind us in the warm room, waiting just to shake his hand and get a picture, because that is the father of the greatest hockey player to ever live, not named Steve Yzerman. I joke. But no, it's I don't really have a Walter story other than getting to meet him a few times. My favorite Walter story, though, I heard happened to a friend of a friend, if you will. This is just a couple of years ago, probably 7 years ago. They were playing a men's league game in Brantford, and they were in the dressing room after having a couple Coca-Colas. And of course, they left their sticks outside of the room lined up. Well, Walter had a habit of making sure that no one's sticks was left at the rink. So he picked up a bunch of hockey sticks, threw them in the back of his truck, because that's where he kept some sticks in case anybody needed a hockey stick during the game. So they come out of the room and this guy's sticks are gone. So he goes up to the arena attendant. This is a brand new one piece, $250. And he goes up to the arena attendant and goes, "Someone stole my stick. Do you have cameras?" And the arena attendant goes, "That's just Walter. Here's his home address. Go and tell him what stick it is. He'll have it in his truck." So they drive over to the Gretzky household, and Walter's wife answers the door, and they say, "Oh, excuse me, is Walter here? I think he picked up, our sticks at the rink." And she goes, "Oh, that sounds like Wally. He's actually at a speaking engagement right now. Here's the address of that." So they go over to the speaking engagement, interrupt Walter after not during his engagement, but he's there interacting with people. They go over and say, "Excuse me, Mr. Gretzky, I believe you might have taken my stick from the arena." And he goes, "Oh yeah, come on out." And he opens the back of his truck and there's 100 sticks in there. Have your pick, boys. That was a story that I'm sure has been maybe exaggerated. Maybe some of the details aren't as correct as they first were, but just one of the stories of the access that Walter gave people around Brantford to him and his family. Everyone knows the address of the Gretzky household. It's not like it's secret. You just have to Google Gretzky family household. It pops up on Google Maps. It's that simple and that much of a landmark in that city. But I think that story alone just shows the kind of guy that Walter was, and the family that the Gretzkys are around Brantford. That just come on in and name me another person, that has a parking spot at any arena designated to them only. You go to the Brantford Arena, there is a parking spot right out front that says Lord Mayor, Mr. Walter Gretzky. It has his picture on it. That is his parking spot. The guy, why? But that's how big he was.
I'm gonna come back to that home address in just a sec. The first time I got to meet Walter was at a Brantford Sports Award banquet one night that I had the privilege of being the MC for, and attended with Mike Torkia, my former broadcast partner on Kitchener Rangers broadcasts on Rogers TV, and of course a former Ranger and former everybody else who will at some point be a guest on this podcast, by the way. Anyway, we met him for the first time that night, and then several years later, the Memorial Cup was being hosted in Kitchener, and I'm still pretty young in the game here. I'm not in the league that long. I'm not long enough to have any airs about me, that's for sure. And I was at the rink during the day, well before a game. There was some practicing going on and whatnot. But anyway, and Walter was in the rink, and I was there meeting with the TV crew. And our producer sees him. He's like, we gotta make sure Walter's on the broadcast tonight. Go line up an interview. I'm like, I'm not just gonna walk up to Walter Gretzky and no, he's a great guy. Anyway, of course he was a great guy. I didn't know this. I was kind of intimidated, but I go and I talk to him. So, and I don't want to interrupt him. He's just watching some hockey, right? Yeah. Anyway, he obviously makes the time of day for me, and we arrange then. He's like, well, before the game, I have to do this. And first intermission, I have to do that. But you find me second intermission. I'll be right here. And then we can do the interview. And sure as the day is long, we went to where Wally said he would be by that second intermission, and he gave us the interview. It was, to me, it still is rather incredible. But here's what I think might be the most incredible thing of all, and it's going to come back to what you said about the family address. So on the weekend, this past weekend, watching Wayne's eulogy, and then I hate to say it, but the COVID conspiracy mind started to do the math, and like asking myself, hang on a second here, how can Walter Gretzky have died overnight Thursday into Friday? There's already a funeral 2 days later, and Wayne is speaking live at this. Just, I know he's Wayne Gretzky, but are we making exceptions? And I get it too. It's a close family member. Your father dies. I'm sure there's some sort of, anyway. I'm going through all these scenarios in my head, but then you listen to Wayne talk about the previous 21 days and how difficult they've been, and it starts to sink in. Hang on a second. He didn't just fly in for the funeral. He's been in Brantford or in the vicinity for 3 weeks. His father was in such a state of ill health that they knew the end was near. And what did you hear about it? Nothing. That's I believe that's the respect shown this family. Wayne Gretzky, arguably the most recognizable hockey player on the planet, can come back home to Brantford and nobody is going to make a media circus out of it. Come on. That's pretty incredible. And I think that's respect.
100%. And for all those people wondering how he got into the country and if he had to quarantine, let me let you in on a little secret. Wayne does what he wants in this country. 2,857 points in the National Hockey League, was the GM behind Team Canada's Olympic hopes. This guy, it doesn't matter. It's Wayne Gretzky. Like, find me a bar owner that made him pay for a beer in the last 20 years or a meal. Come on. The guy just does what he wants. Get over it.
It's pretty incredible.
Speaking of,
he's reaching for it. What did you break? The Memorial Cup?
Well,
that happened.
No, I didn't break it. It's been like that. On my desk here in my office, nice little Wayne Gretzky bobblehead.
Solid. I like it.
Yeah. The head pops off. But
that's not going to get you much on eBay, pal.
No. Oh, you think I'm selling that? It's got the Team Canada emblem there when he was GM. It always reminds me of the I'm sure this movie's been seen on the bus by you a couple times, but the Dumb and Dumber scene,
God,
our pets' heads are falling off.
Anyway, it's the only way I would have ever ended up seeing Dumb and Dumber is
it's a great movie. Maybe the greatest movie ever made.
Come on. I just actually rewatched Slapshot in my pandemic life. Now that's a great movie.
Yeah, it's a fantastic movie. Somebody who won't be watching Slapshot or Dumb and Dumber on a plane ride anymore, Jeff Ward.
So there are
Rangers head coach.
OHL ties, obviously, 4 years with the Kitchener Rangers, during which he had a player on his team by the name of Joe Birch, who just happens to be the chief operating officer of the Kitchener Rangers now. Then he spent a year in Guelph, and one of his assistant coaches was a guy by the name of Mike Parson, previous guest on this podcast, and I think somebody, Chris, that you might know a little bit in a familial sense.
Yes, if you haven't caught that podcast, make sure to go back and watch it. It's a doozy. Funny connection with Jeff Ward. He would have no idea who I was, just for the record. But I was working at a hockey school in Guelph. My uncle obviously got me the hookup, Can-Am/Stars. And I was basically just a puck wrangler, or as they called it, a goaltending coach. No, I was not coaching anyone, but these were young kids, and they brought out people. Matter of fact, Dale Hunter showed up. He was one of the all-stars that they brought out.
You know what? We should find a way to get Dale Hunter's name in every podcast until he comes on. Hey, Dale.
I can do that.
Yeah, we're waiting for your call back. We haven't called him yet. We're going to get you on this podcast, Dale. It's happening.
He was playing for Washington at the time, me being a Red Wings supporter. I believe the Wings beat out Washington at some point, or they lost and the Wings moved on or whatever. Anyway, I made sure to go up to him and let him know that my Red Wings were better than the Capitals. Little did I know how terrifying Dale Hunter was back then, or I would not have said a word. But anyway, Jeff Ward was one of the coaches during that hockey school, and we were often sat across from one another in the locker room. lacing up our skates and putting on our sweatsuits and stuff. And I just remember him looking absolutely terrifying. And I didn't say 2 words to him. That's my Jeff Ward connection.
Well, it's interesting that you talk about him looking absolutely terrifying, because it ties into the story that I wanted to share about Jeff Ward. But the career arc is pretty damn interesting too, when you think about it. Like, he was a teacher at an elementary school in Kitchener. Like, that's where he was working before getting into coaching. He does a year with the University of Waterloo Warriors, a program that's headed right now by Brian Burke, who is a guy that just does great work, I think, with the hockey club, but moved his way up through the ranks. As we mentioned, 4 years with Kitchener, a year with Guelph. Apparently, legend has it, and you talk about how terrifying Jeff Ward is or was. The guy
seemed like it.
Well, and when you look at him now, still, even at his age, I mean, I shouldn't talk, but the guy is like, he's a machine. He's very fit. Fitness has always been an important part of his life. Jeff Ward's idea of carb loading after a game, and we've seen the players do it, Popey. They get their pasta and their meals on the bus and off they go. It was a little bit different for Jeff, because he would eat baked potatoes, just like the potato. So he would we'd get 2 potatoes wrapped up in tinfoil and open them up and chomp down the potatoes. That was his way of carb loading after a game.
I know it's an unpopular opinion, but I'm not a big fan of baked potatoes.
You know what?
Why?
I don't know how unpopular that is, because that makes 2 of us. Yeah? I don't mind the good old fashioned spud. Like, come on, we're in Canada. I mean, heck, we worked with Don Cameron for a while. We have to find some way to like the potato, but the baked potato may be the weakest of all potato creations.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of mashed or baked. If you're going to make a potato, just give it to me in a French fry or a potato chip. So obviously I like the deep fried stuff, which goes to show you why I'm the size I am.
Mashed potatoes are the best. What is
they're not. With you? That's the thing. They're not. No, take away the gravy or the butter or whatever else you put on it. They're terrible. Like, you can't eat them. You'll end up like gagging. Just mashed potatoes without the gravy? No, they're terrible.
Speaking of French fries, because you brought it up, and then we'll get to what we think is going on with the Ontario Hockey League, which I don't know if anybody really knows. But when you talk about French fries, it makes me think of Owen Sound. We all know, or you and I have documented, following in the footsteps of Don Cameron, we believe the best fries in the league to be the fries served at the Bayshore. We traditionally get a bucket of them before we do a broadcast and eat them during the broadcast. So it just so happened that I had Ian Boddy, who is the mayor of Owen Sound, on my radio show the other week. Because, because Owen Sound has started a campaign to they call themselves the work from home capital of Canada. And they're encouraging people that are sick of the city life to come live and work from Owen Sound, because, the pandemic's changed everything. So I'm having him on the air. Great guy. We're having a nice little chat. And I said, I don't know if you know this, Mayor Boddy, but I also happen to be the play-by-play voice for the Kitchener Rangers on this radio station. He says, yes, I did know that. I said, well, maybe we could, make a little wager sometime the next time we're up in Owen Sound, and we could wager a bucket of fries from the game, because they're the best fries in the league. He says, well, Mike, we have a number of fine craft breweries here now too. So I'm like, well, okay, if that's how you roll up there in Grey County, I'm in.
I thought it was all old Vienna up in Grey County. But hey, if he wants to make a bet, I want in on the French fries. I can help supply some of the Coors Light or Canadian, or some Creamore, not far from Owen Sound. We can, but the fries have to be involved. I'm sorry.
We'll have to make a little tour though, because I haven't been that way in a while to find it. We missed a whole season of traveling up to the Bayshore to check out these craft breweries.
I'm challenging the mayor on this. I'm sorry. There are no good craft breweries in Owen Sound. Okay.
Fair enough.
I can say this because my family lives in Owen Sound, and I'm sorry for everybody from Owen Sound, but we always joke with my cousin who was born there that in Owen Sound, you either marry your cousin or you smell like fish. It's one or the other. This portion, beautiful spot though. I really do like going there.
The OHL Stories podcast is brought to you by Chris Pope. You can reach him on Twitter at _Chris Pope. I'm at Farwell _OHL. Tweet us anytime.
Real quick, I do the coffee reviews half-hearted, jokingly on the road to promote our broadcast, but they do have a really good coffee shop up there. I can't remember the name of it, and I'm really sorry. Something about a frog or a toad.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. It's something about a frog or a toad.
Fantastic coffee. Fantastic coffee. So I'll give them that. And the Chi-Chi-Mon's nice. They have the lights in the winter. It's a great spot. It's a great spot. Speaking of, are we ever going to
hang on? The Chi-Chi-Mon, that goes from Tobermory. What's it doing down in Owen Sound?
It's always in Owen Sound. I shouldn't say it's always in Owen Sound, but yeah, that's where it ports, in Owen Sound.
I'll be ding-danged. I only ever knew it leaving from Tobermory going over to Manitoulin Island.
Farwell and Pope podcast, OHL Stories. That's where you learn about the Chi-Chi-Mon.
We try to keep up with the Ontario Hockey League too. So
I thought an announcement was coming out today. I really did.
Graham Clark, Ottawa 67s, signing his entry-level deal with the New Jersey Devils. So congratulations to that young man. I'm with you, Popey. I thought that we would hear, we are recording this on Thursday, March the 11th. I would have thought that by the end of this week. So maybe, Friday the 12th is still hours away.
This preamble might be completely useless in 12 hours or 24 hours time.
It's interesting that we now have Ontario's Minister of Sport, Lisa McLeod, weighing in, talking like she sounds confident. She sounds to me almost as though she knows something that she's not telling the rest of us. But it sounds like she's confident games can be played. Money's going to be required, but she did not say that the government would not be providing that financial support. So, okay, contact would be allowed, of course. So I'm of the mind that really this is just a matter of dotting some I's and crossing some T's. And what I believe is going to happen in all of this is that there's a deal, if not consummated already, very close, but the instructions have been given to the clubs as to what's going to happen. And then all of a sudden it's going to be go time and we're going to go. But players are already coming back. They're doing their quarantining. They're doing whatever needs to be done. And it's going to be a real short on-ramp into a 20-ish game season.
I don't know if we're that close with players coming back quite yet, because I think that there's still time for them to be wherever they are playing to come back in quarantine before the season starts. But I do think the league and the government have some sort of deal. And now the league has notified the teams/cities that they're going to be playing in to get their ducks in a row immediately and get back to them when it's done. And then that announcement can come out, because there's a lot of logistical things. But wouldn't it be very much like this league and this province to let a good news story like this come out at Friday at 4 p.m.?
Well, it'd be, yeah, you're right. Actually, both the government and the league could be accused of missing the boat when it comes for the best bang for their promotional buck. I'm just looking at the calendar on my phone here.
Yes.
So the league likes to, traditionally, it will start on a Thursday, right? And the first 2 Thursdays in April are the 1st and then the 8th. So I'm going to throw it out there right now and put April 8th as a date to circle on your calendar for a beginning to the OHL season, which would be 4 weeks from today.
I'll go along with you there. I think that's a perfect date to do it. Half the games in April, half the games in May, and then playoffs in June, cap it, see you in September.
Cap what? Is there going to be a Memorial Cup? Because this is the question I've been asking myself. You don't think so? Why? See, so do they announce the cancellation of the Memorial Cup at the same time they announce the start of the OHL season?
No, I don't think they'll announce it until someone asks. It's still, well, I don't know. Maybe there is, because there's a lot of sponsorship money there, man. And money that it will make people do crazy things. And I think there's a lot of money wrapped up in that Memorial Cup one way or another: broadcast rights, sponsorship rights, everything. So maybe there is, maybe they're going to try to come up with a way to do it. I don't know how. Well, I know how. You'd have to just fly in 2 teams. Maybe it's not that crazy. If you think about it, you're really only flying in 2 teams, get them to quarantine or rapid testing, and you could have your Memorial Cup, because you're already going to do a bubble type city in the Ontario Hockey League anyway, if it's going to work. So maybe there is a Memorial Cup in Ontario. Oshawa wouldn't get it, but no harm, no foul, because you're not going to make as much money during the pandemic for Memorial Cup. There's not going to be fans coming and supporting your community. So maybe there is a Memorial Cup. You never know.
Well, and if you want to get really crazy, because Ontario is the host this year, the plan at last check from the provincial government in Ontario is that everybody who wishes to be vaccinated will be vaccinated by the beginning of summer, which is right around the time. I mean, that's a game changer in all of this, right? I'm just putting that out there. That's a game changer in all of this. I'm not saying we're going to put 10,000 people into an arena to watch a hockey game. I'm just saying it could eliminate some of the barriers of getting teams from one place to another to play some kind of championship tournament.
Yeah, it could eliminate those barriers, but it's not going to be a Memorial Cup with a full stadium, or I'm going to say it with fans even in attendance.
Nope, I agree with that.
That June deadline ain't happening. I'll tell you that right now.
Wow. Okay,
Zero chance.
I'm the pessimist in this relationship. Come on.
Yeah, I'm a realist, and that ain't happening. But the majority, I shouldn't say the majority, a lot of the people at the Memorial Cup celebrations are family and friends of the players coming into Ontario from those other leagues. And you're just not going to have that. It's not safe. And I don't think it's really what the league wants. Really, you want to do it as safe as possible, get it over with, done, move on, see you in September. And that's where you can really concentrate on maybe getting some fans into a building, showing proof of vaccination and so on and so forth. But keep in mind, just because you're vaccinated doesn't mean you can't get it. It just means you're not going to become severely and deadly ill from it. You can still get the virus, even though you're vaccinated. That's a whole other story. Anyway, we have a guest.
Okay. And just before we get to this guest, who's been one of my favorites since I first got into this league. I've been following the stuff that she has written, and I still do, because quite frankly, she, and as much as it pains me to give him the credit, but I got to give it to him, Terry Doyle, were my lifelines when I was starting out in this league, because they seemed to me, they were the most easily accessible people to find information from, certainly in the OHL. Nate Sager was always doing a great job too, through Yahoo and et cetera. Anyway, not to get into all of that, we'll get to the guest in a second, but I do have a little bit more intel. So you and I are on the record now as saying there's a season, like something is going to happen.
Oh yeah, it's happening.
We're confident in that. Yeah. We talked a little bit last week about what it's going to look like from a broadcast perspective. I got a little more intel on that, thanks to the loyal OHL Stories listeners for providing a little bit more detail, I think, and it makes sense to me. I'm not going to, say this is absolutely confirmed, but when we were talking about the broadcast and what it would look like last week, I wasn't really thinking about the bubble. I was thinking about, what happens if you're in Owen Sound? What happens when you're in Sudbury? All these different things. But if you think about the bubble scenario, which is almost certainly what's going to play out, it's going to be in buildings that are capable of hosting a number of teams in one place and this and that. And what's going to happen is the broadcasts will absolutely happen. It's just that the media and the players and team staff will be completely separate. So if you think of the Kingstons of the world, the Sault Ste. Maries of the world, maybe the Kitcheners or Londons of the world, and we know the rinks well enough, Popey. That
interesting 4 cities you just mentioned, Michael.
Yeah, well, you could easily, as a broadcaster, go in one door of that building right up to the broadcast area, stay there, and the players and team staff could do their thing at a completely different area of the rink, and there you go. So you have a broadcast crew in the broadcast area doing their thing. You've got players and team staff in the playing area doing their thing, and you're all set to go.
I get that, but again, I want to know selfishly, say, let's take Sudbury for instance, or Ottawa. Is the Ottawa radio team then going to drive back and forth to that hub city for every game they're playing, or are they going to go stay there and then you have to get a hotel? And then anyway,
that's going to be up to their broadcast side, right? Employer, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and same with the television. Who's calling these games, or is it just going to be a video feed? Because so is that hub cities, Rogers TV or Shaw broadcast team then going to cover all the games, or are TV crews or play-by-play and color guys who in large part do it either volunteer or for very little pay, expected to go back and forth to the hub city? I'm sure it's at the bottom of the league's list. Like it might even be under the footnotes, but I still am curious as to how that will play out.
I think you'll call in a local crew, Popey. Whatever crew happens to work in the city where the hub is located is going to be doing a lot of work for a couple of months. That's what I think is going to happen. All right.
That like me knocking on wood.
I know why.
I have a mortgage.
I know why. All right. We teased it a little bit already, but I love it when you set it up. So put the tablecloth down, get the silverware out, and set the table for this guest.
From family from England, moving over to Canada, an import to this country, but boy, has she blazed a trail. There is no other way around it. She is a trailblazer, a trend setter. From the Toronto Star to loose pucks on Twitter, for everybody that remembers that, to buzz in the net on Yahoo, now at some small operation called The Athletic. Now moving into the editing basketball side, but one of the premier people to ever cover the Ontario Hockey League. And yes, again, I want to point out Trailblazer. If you see it, you can become it. Sunaya Sapurji.
All right. So true story to start OHL Stories this week. And I don't mean to put an age on our guest, so forgive me for that. But when I started covering the Ontario Hockey League, there were two people that I could read to get information: Terry Doyle and our guest this week, Sunaya Sapurji. Sunaya, I think I should give you credit or royalties for all of my pregame preparation back around 1999, 2000, because you were all I had. Toronto Star, Yahoo Sports, all that stuff was coming out, and it's all I could consume to know what I was going to talk about that weekend.
I'll take a check, Mike.
It's in the mail. It's in the mail. Isn't that what I'm supposed to say? It's in the mail. When I think back, though, on those days, Sunaya, like I'm breaking in, and I don't want to, like, the internet was around, but I mean, it was hard to come by stuff. So you were generating that content. Take us back to the early days of covering this league and how difficult it was to source the information that you were gathering.
You know what? I think it was not too bad. Of course, there was the internet when I started at the start. I'm not that old, but you know, and I think the big difference back then was that newspapers and you know, magazines and things like that actually focused on junior hockey. So there was kind of a need for it. There was a fan base that wanted it. There's a fan base that still wants it now, but I think the way the media has changed, the space that you might once have had for it, you see places cutting back, and that was not the case. When I first started, at the Star, we had a weekly OHL notebook that I did along with covering the GTA teams, Mississauga, Toronto, Brampton, and Oshawa. They were kind of the teams that I covered regularly. So it was actually it was not that difficult. You know, I had done some OHL stuff before when I was in university, working at the radio station there, a campus community radio station there. I did a weekly OHL show there, and so I knew I had contacts from before, and so it was good. I mean, we had a pretty good run at the Star, and then when I went to Yahoo, that's all I did was junior hockey. So that was a bit different, just focusing on it pretty much 24/7. But then at Yahoo, we did the entire CHL. It wasn't just the OHL. So it was a lot of expanded coverage, and we had a great team there.
Mike mentioned that Yahoo, and you were really a pioneer in covering this league through, I think it was it Buzzing the Net? Is that what it was? Yeah,
that was our blog, Nate Sager, and we had a bunch of people in the queue. We had Nathan White and Mike Sanderson, and then in the Western Hockey League, we had different writers there. Scott Tebich, Cam Schron, who's with the Leafs now, was part of our coverage at the time. We had a great group.
That Buzzing the Net, I remember when I was in university at the College of Sports Media in Toronto, I was writing for a website and helping edit the website called thegoodpoint.com, which is now gone on to basically run its own NBA fantasy league. But anyway, I remember we would send Buzzing the Net our articles that we would write. Like I went down to Windsor and interviewed Taylor Hall, and we would send Buzzing the Net just in hopes that we could get a link drop in their annual weekly links from around the CHL. Whenever we did, I remember my partner and I would call each other. We were like, we're on Yahoo. So thank you.
You're welcome. Nate put those together. So he should get the credit for that.
All right. So now we've determined about 4 minutes into this podcast that I owe Sunaya a check and Popey, you owe Nate a check.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. They're all in the mail. They'll come out when we get checks for this podcast. also thinking from the early days of covering this league, Sunaya, uh, you're a woman trying to cover this league. I shouldn't say trying. You are covering this league, but that's something that we're only starting to see more of today, Chris and I. And we can probably find a woman covering the game or somehow involved in the game in every rink we go into. But I know when I started and I was reading your stuff, you were almost the only female voice. How aware of that were you at the time, and how did it change the way you approached the job, if at all?
Oh, I was super aware of it because there weren't very many women, and there were even fewer women who were minorities. And so I think when I first started, there was one other woman on the beat, and that was Lisa Burke, who was covering the Ottawa 67s for a while. I don't remember how long she did it for, but she was there for a time as well. And then when Lisa left, I think I was the only one in the OHL for quite some time, especially in print. But yeah, it was something that I was definitely aware of. When I first started, media were allowed to go into the dressing rooms. And so, I remember like Don Brankley, when I would go to London, would quickly go in, tell them I was coming in, and then they would be like, okay. And so and then I would go in and talk to whoever I needed to talk to and get out. It wasn't until later that they started bringing whoever you wanted out of the room, and then that's one thing that changed later on. It was much later after that, but it was definitely something that was very front of mind when I was covering the league, especially when I first started.
Without having another woman covering the league to look up to, who in journalism did you look up to?
I was very lucky when I was at the Star. I got to work with Mary Ormsby, who was a trailblazer herself. When I was working at the Star, she was the assistant sports editor there, and she's definitely somebody who I've always looked up to. Another person in hockey was Sherry Ross, who was doing play-by-play for the New Jersey Devils. And when the first time I ever went into a hockey dressing room, it was actually a Leafs. I was at a Leafs practice, and I was like terrified. I had no idea what I was doing. I was still in university at the time, and Sherry was there. It was they were playing the Devils later that night, and she kind of took me under her wing and took me into the dressing room and kind of gave me the lay of the land. And I was so grateful for that. It really helped me out a lot. So she's definitely somebody who I looked up to as well, and still do.
Bluntly, Sunaya, considering, time goes by pretty fast. 20 years ago seems like a long time ago, but wasn't that long ago. How much did you face by way of sexism, racism when you're trying to do your job 25 years ago?
It was brutal. I remember, well, I think especially the racism part, I think because my situation was unique. When I would get emails and things like that, I was never sure if they were angry at me because I was a woman or because I was a minority. Like, it was hard to differentiate, but I would get a lot of it. And I think at the time, when I was at the Star, I actually kept a folder of the emails. And at that time, I think the readership was kind of older at the Star. And so I would get things mailed to me. And so I would keep those things. And, I always thought particularly the things that were mailed to me, this person not only took the time to write out their racist, sexist rant, but they also went and got a stamp for it and went to the mailbox. That's actually, it's a lot of time, and they put a lot of thought into that. And so I always kept that stuff. and looked at it occasionally just to, I actually used it as motivation and almost like a pick-me-up, like, I'm still doing this, no matter what these people write or say. But yeah, it was difficult. And I mean, even at Yahoo, I would get that stuff. Even at The Athletic now, I still get that stuff. It's not like it's magically disappeared as time has passed. And I think one of the great things about the Star is that they allowed me to write stories about race. And that wasn't something that a lot of places were tackling. I remember one of the first stories I ever wrote was about Kingston had a player named Derek Campbell. And somebody had, I think, called him the N-word or a monkey. It was one of the players on the Barrie Colts. They had an import player who had said that to him, but because the officials hadn't heard, like nothing was done about it. And so that was one of the stories they let me write. I wrote a lot about Trevor Daley and the John Van Beesbrook incident when that happened. And so I was very fortunate in that I got to write those stories, because not a lot of people were doing those stories at that time.
You mentioned those stories. In 2003, you wrote an article titled "Racism Rampant in OHL." We just had the situation with Giovanni Smith just a couple of years ago up in Sault Ste. Marie. Do you still think it's rampant in the OHL?
Yeah, I think it's pretty pervasive everywhere. I think but I think it's still very prevalent in hockey. I think there are a lot of issues as to why that is, and I think there are economic issues that also play into that as well. When you talk about accessibility issues and trying to grow the game to a larger audience, but I definitely think that's still a big issue.
What was it for you, Sunaya, that attracted you to not even so much the industry of sport, but the league, the Ontario Hockey League itself, as you were starting out?
As a kid growing up, I used to watch OHL Game of the Week with Sherry Bassett. It was on Global TV, I think it was every Saturday afternoon, I want to say. And that was, I thought it was the greatest thing in the world, and so when I got a little bit older, my dad used to take me down to watch Marlies games. And so the thing about Marlies games was you could go to a Marlies game, and then afterwards the Leafs would practice. And so you could see the Leafs practice, and you could see whoever the Leafs were playing against practice. And so, I would go and watch the Red Wings practice, or, whoever else was down there after the Marlies game. And it would be a whole day downtown at Maple Leaf Gardens, watching hockey and NHL practice, which I thought was the greatest thing ever. So that's kind of how I got into it.
Your family came over from England, if I read correctly, mm-hmm. and your grandmother became a big fan of the Habs, even though she couldn't watch couldn't understand or speak French. How much did she influence your love of the game?
Not that much, because when she started really getting into the Habs, I was already working. I was working part-time at Global TV. And so she would be watching the Habs while I was at work, waiting up for me to come home. I worked the 4 to midnight shift. And so, I think she liked the speed of it. And I think at that time, the Habs were a fast team. And so I don't know why she just chose the Habs, but I guess it must have been on at the time, on RDS or whatever she was, French CBC, whatever she was watching it on. It was weird that she liked the Habs, but that was her team. because I wasn't a Habs fan. I wasn't even a Leafs fan. So it was odd, I think, that she picked the Habs.
You had the opportunity, Sunaya, to cover some of the giants of this game. We were talking about Larry Mavety just before we started recording here today. Bert Templeton, Dave McQueen, Mike Vellucci in his years in Plymouth. I remember you and I have had many a chat about him. Brian Kilray goes without saying, etc. Who are some of the characters that you remember and what made them stand out?
Well, I think the top of my list has to be Mav. You know, when I started out, he was somebody who was very kind. You know, I remember when I was in university working at the radio station there, when I was doing my weekly OHL show, one of the first stories I did, I was still a high school student at the time. But because it was a campus community radio station, they would take volunteers in, and I knew I was going to be going to York, so I figured I would volunteer a year before I actually went to school there. And so when I was doing the OHL show, I decided to go down and interview a new kid they had in Belleville named Dan Cleary. And so I set it all up, and I went down, and Mav was just like, he didn't, you know, he didn't care that I was really young. He didn't care that I was like terrified. He didn't care that, you know, that I was a woman or that I was a minority. He was just like, what do you need, kid? You know? And so he was awesome. And like, I thought like everyone in the league or everyone in hockey or everyone in sports was going to be that welcoming and awesome. And so he kind of tricked me in that way into thinking it was going to be an easy experience or, you know, a welcoming one. And so that's something that I never forgot. And so, you know, the other thing is when, you know, I covered a lot of Mavs teams in Belleville and in Kingston, like when it was time to you know, hold him to task or take him to task, like I did that, and I always felt bad, but he was never really upset about it, because I think he knew what I was writing was like fair. And so yeah, Mav is definitely at the top of the list. Also, he just had the best stories. He was just the best guy. But Killer's got to be up there too. If you're talking about Mav, you have to talk about Killer. And he was, you know, he was also great, very welcoming, also amazing storyteller. But there were just so many characters. I mean, Sherry Bassin, another awesome, great guy with like stories. Mike Vellucci was definitely one, and also Pete DeBoer in Kitchener. Not so much of a character, but somebody who was always very thoughtful when you were talking to them. You know, he always had interesting things to say. Spent a lot of time covering Dave Cameron and his teams in Toronto. So that was another coach and GM I spent a lot of time talking to. But there were many, and definitely lots of characters for sure.
You had a tweet thread after Mav passed that I thought was just amazing. When you look back on your guys' relationship, is there one story that stands out from Mav? Because we talked about it before we started this podcast. Farwell and I really dropped the ball in not getting him on last year up in Kingston. So do you have a good Mav story for us?
You know what? All of the stories, a lot of them I can't tell.
Yeah.
A lot of them I can't tell. But I'll tell you this one, I guess, because I've told this story before. And Mav, I should say, Mav kind of hated this story when I told it. But he always called me like a smart ass for telling the story. But it was the first time I ever went into like Mav's office. Like it was in the old Yardman, like in the arena in Belleville, and it was like not a particularly big office, and it wasn't it wasn't like really neat or tidy or anything like that. And the thing I remember most that pisses Mav off or pissed him off when I would tell the story is that there would be like cases and cases of beer, and like I would have to like climb over these cases of beer in order to get into like the seat where I could talk and like interview him. And so he always hated that because of all the beer cases there.
I remember.
Love it.
I remember a series of stories you started to do about players' off-season jobs, and I absolutely loved it. What inspired it, and what do you remember might be one of the weirdest / best summer or off-season jobs that a player had?
I can't remember how that started, but I remember the majors. The first one I ever did was a majors goaltender named Wayne Savage. And he worked in construction in the off season. And just going back, talking about Mav, one of the things he mentioned was that when he was playing pro hockey, that's what guys would do in the off season. Like there at that time, there was no like training workout regimens with like trainers going to the gym or whatever. You got a job in construction, and that was like your summer workout. And so that's what Wayne Savage would do. Some of the other great jobs, there was a kid named Garrett Clark in the Q in the Quebec League who was a bear hunting guide. And so like his job would be like putting like rotting meat into like buckets and like leaving it out in the bush so that they could attract bears. Yeah. So that was an interesting one. I'm trying to think. Kevin Bailey. I don't know if you remember him from the Oshawa Generals. He was a goaltender. He was a dishwasher at Eastside Mario's. I think it might have been in Oshawa or Belleville. I can't remember where it was, but it was actually the Eastside Mario's where a lot of teams would go to eat. And so when he would go back, like to the restaurant he worked at, essentially with the Generals, like they would make him special meals just because he worked there.
That's fantastic.
But yeah, that was a super fun series that I did. A lot of guys they had really cool jobs too. There was a guy named Bo McHugh who played he was captain of the Tri-City Americans. He worked on a ranch as like a kind of like a ranch hand, taking care of horses and stuff like that. So that was really cool. Like that was like one where I think I would like to do that. But like some of the other guys like worked in roofing, and it was like very labor intensive. So those were kind of like some of the hard ones. I remember one kid worked in a bakery, which was really difficult because he was trying to watch his weight, and that was not conducive to to keeping his weight down for the start of the season. Eating all those cupcakes in the off season. So
yeah, I couldn't imagine if Farwell and I worked in a bakery, it'd be even bigger than we are right now.
Forget it. I'd be done.
Jeez. I remember former Rangers captain Liam Maskant started a landscaping business with him and his friend during the off season. That's what they did.
Ray Huthler, who I think he was with the Sudbury Wolves.
Yeah.
They started their own business doing odd jobs and stuff like that. Yeah. I remember. I think they had to clear out like some sort of chicken coop with like a bunch of chickens. I just remember the photo they sent me was like of the two of them in like this barn or something, and they're surrounded by like baby chicks. So. Yeah.
So we've had a Ray, we've had a Liam. I think we've mentioned a couple other names, and I think you know where I'm going with this. Your fascination And I might be even compulsive disorder when it comes to names. I don't want to ask how long it took you to come up with a name for your son, but I can only imagine, where did this love for different players' names come from?
You know what? I think it was, being someone with like a quote unquote different name, not an unconventional name. I think it's always been like, I've always found like, names and kind of the thought process that goes into, your name and how you were named. I've always found that interesting. And I don't know how it started in the Western Hockey League, but it's been ongoing. Like it's now at the point where I will actually take that day off of work so that I can focus on seeing who gets drafted and what their name is. But yeah, just naming Charlie took a super long time, because I wanted to make sure like I looked at every single angle before giving him that name. Yeah.
Did you have it down to like a solid 3 and then over a couple of weeks drop it down to 2 and then?
No, you know what? My husband and I, we came up with a girl's name like right away, and then a boy's name we just went back and forth, and it wasn't until like the weekend before he came that we decided on what his name was going to be. So
real quick, whether it's in the WHL or not, do you have a favorite major junior name that you've seen? Does one always stick with you?
You know what? There are a couple. Probably one of my favorites, only just because I'm really big, being a Sunaya Sapurji, I'm very big on alliteration. So there was a kid named Shell Clemhus. And so if you see it written out, it's really awesome, because it's the KJ Clemhus. So and then another kid whose name I've always loved was Cruz Plummer.
Cruz Plummer.
Yeah, but Cruz is spelled KRZ. Yeah, Cruz.
I like it.
Yeah. So that's always, I think Cruz Plummer is probably my most dubbed name. Like,
I like it.
Okay. I'm trying to remember the backstory, and I can't, but I saw it come up on Twitter recently when you announced that you'd be leaving the hockey beat with The Athletic and moving to the NBA, which again just goes to show, 20 years ago, I'm starting the OHL. I'm reading Sunaya's stuff. I'm still in the OHL. She's covering the NBA. Let that sink in for a second here.
Just to set the record straight, I'm not covering the NBA. I'm editing the NBA. So
okay,
I'm taking
sure.
Of our Raptors and Celtics coverage. I'm still going to be writing about hockey.
Okay, thank goodness.
But editing wise, I'm just moving to the NBA side.
Tell Blake Murphy what's up. He's a good guy. A good guy.
Blake
is one
of my guys. He's the best.
He's a great guy.
So it was asked of you on Twitter when this announcement was made that you were switching roles at The Athletic, if your Twitter background picture was going to change. And I'm trying to remember, has it got something to do with peanuts or peanut butter? I'm trying to remember all of the pieces here, but it's an awesome picture. Check out at Sunaya Sapurji on Twitter. But what's the deal?
Yeah, so that's a photo of oh my gosh, I can't believe his name. I'm drawing a blank. And Carol Cavanaugh. Carol Cavanaugh, who played in the Q for a number of years, won the Memorial Cup with the Moncton Wildcats, was drafted by the New York Islanders, and there were a couple of stories involving him. He was an amazing character. You want to talk about amazing characters? Carol Cavanaugh was an amazing character when he was in junior hockey. And so one of the stories is he was cut by the Russian national team because one of the coaches had some peanuts on his desk. And during like a meeting or whatever, Carol took some of the peanuts and ate them. Like, while while they were talking, and the coach didn't like that, and he ended up getting cut. And then when he was with the Islanders, I think he famously slept in and showed up late for practice twice. So yeah, Carol.
Didn't he have that great photo from draft day or whatever? And he's like,
yeah. So that's the photo that is the background on
gotcha.
Twitter. Somebody, I don't even know who did it, but somebody like superimposed that like at a museum with like a dinosaur in the background. So I love that photo. and so that's just been my Twitter. That's been my background forever.
Going from like newspaper, and then you were doing the Yahoo stuff, now to Athletic, who's kind of changing journalism in itself. How was that transition?
It's been pretty seamless. When I was at Yahoo, it was like a digital space, working in online media, and so I think the Athletic is no different. I was very, very lucky when I was at Yahoo, in that I worked for Steve McAllister, who was just an incredible boss and who let us do stories that we thought were important. And that's, I think, the same at The Athletic. They give us a lot of leeway in what we can cover. And, taking the time to tell stories well, I think is something that The Athletic really prides itself in doing. And, I've definitely been able to do some of that work. Like, a couple of years ago, I wrote a 6,000 word piece on the relationship between punk rock and hockey. And there are not a lot of places where, they're gonna let me do that. Or the series that I did looking at development models in Europe, or the US and Canada. That was like a 7-part series. And there are not a lot of places that are gonna, let people do that kind of work.
I just wanted to ask, because I like what The Athletic's doing. It's showing that there's still a spot for long form journalism online, when it's not just like the 100-word blog post about Nylander's second shift. That's all.
I don't know, Sunaya, if it was the wildest story or event that you covered when you were covering junior hockey, or the most memorable, but you reshared a link to it many, many years later. And I saw the reshare of the link, and I took it back to your original piece about the 2000 Memorial Cup. Take us back to that experience and what it was that you covered that made it so memorable and perhaps so wild.
I think that entire season, and we're talking about the Barrie Colts in particular, that entire season, from literally from start, which started with a massive brawl against when they were playing the Oshawa Generals in the season opener, where there were like multiple suspensions, including I think a 15-game suspension and a 25-game suspension, if I remember correctly. It was a 25-game suspension. And that was like the start of the season. And then it kind of snowballed and continued getting like weirder and stranger and crazier until they eventually made it to the Memorial Cup. And it never stopped being crazy that season.
For those who don't know the story around the 2000 Memorial Cup, why didn't it stop being crazy?
There were many factors. But I mean, there were, I don't know how much people remember about Dave Frost and kind of like the quote unquote cult that he had with some of the Colts on that team. There was Bill Stewart, who was the coach and general manager of the team at that time. he ended up being suspended because he put one of their imports in the baggage compartment of their bus to go across the border because he didn't have the correct paperwork. Like, those are just, you know, the kind of crazy things that happened during that season. You know, I remember there was another player who ended up slew footing someone in the playoffs. He was like, it was Ryan O'Keefe. He ended up getting a massive suspension that carried through most of the playoffs, and he was able to play in the Memorial Cup after that. But like, I mean, so once they actually got to the Memorial Cup, they like walked out of the banquet. They have an opening kind of banquet for all of the teams, and because the league had sanctioned them so many times before, you know, leading up to the Memorial Cup, I guess they took it personally, and so they walked out of like the banquet, and like Sheldon Keefe was the captain of the Colts at that time. I remember he refused to shake Dave Branch's hand, and it just became a thing, and it was crazy. I think one of my favorite things about that Memorial Cup, which is just, it's hilarious, is that two of the Colts were busted. Two of the Colts rookies at that time were busted for trying to scalp their own Memorial Cup tickets. Like, that's
That's pretty good.
that was probably like my favorite amongst all the crazy things that happened at that Memorial Cup and that season. That's probably one of my favorites, is that they were busted for scalping their own Memorial Cup tickets.
Sorry, Farsi, just real quick, one more on that Memorial Cup. Excuse me. Did another media member leave you downtown Halifax?
Oh, are you talking to me?
Yeah.
Yes, Terry Doyle abandoned me. I'm not gonna get into the details.
Oh, he was at the casino. That's what happened.
I don't remember. I don't remember much about that night, so I will just leave it at that.
Okay, if that year, that Barrie Colts team, that Memorial Cup is the craziest and wildest that you remember from your time, what's the best team you remember covering?
Oh, geez. Oh my gosh, that's a really hard one. The best team. That's so hard, Mike, because there have been so many good teams, so many good players. Probably that London Knights team with like Corey Perry. I can't remember what year that was. My memory is shot now.
05?
Yeah, that's the team we always talk about too. It's hard to argue.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best team. But there are many over the years that I've seen. And you know what? And some really good teams that didn't do anything. That never won anything, that were stopped short from, you know, what they were expected.
Yeah, Plymouth had some big teams back around the turn of the century. The Rangers obviously had some nice runs in 03 and 08. That Peterborough team of 06 was strong.
Yeah. And lots of good players too. I think that's probably my favorite thing about covering junior hockey is getting to see players like John Tavares and, you know, Connor McDavid before they make it to the NHL and become big stars, Nathan McKinnon. You know, you get to talk with them. There are no media people like looking at their watch saying, okay, you've only got 5 minutes. Like, let's wrap this up. You know, you get a chance to meet their families. You know, it's, I think that's probably my favorite part, is you actually get to meet them as people before they become, you know, big celebrities or NHL pros.
You wrote a piece about the passing of OHL legend before my time. Sorry, guys. Before I started covering the league anyway. Jerry Callahan, what do you remember about the commish?
Oh my God, the commish was, you want to talk about a character? The commish was awesome. He was so much fun. He was, I don't even know what his official title was, but if you went to Brampton, he was like the guy you had to see. If you needed anything, the commish was the guy you went to. And he would always, he would sit, and he was the guy you would get your media package from. And when I would go down there, he would always autograph my media package, like, to Sunaya, like, best wishes, love the commish. And so he was the best. He had the best stories. He had gone to see Johnny Cash. He was like a huge, massive Johnny Cash fan. He had seen him a number of times, including the show, I think it was in London, Ontario, but I might be mistaken, where Johnny Cash proposed to June Carter.
That was London. Yep.
Yeah, June Carter Cash eventually. And so, he just had the best Johnny Cash stories. Like, he had, I think, befriended Cash to the point where he would go, and if he was in the, making a trip to Tennessee, he would go to the Cash residence and, like, pop in and say hello. So he had the best stories when it came to, like, anything Johnny Cash related. You could ask the commish, and he would know. But he was a wonderful, wonderful man, and just a great guy, and one of, like, the reasons, like, you would love going to watch Brampton, or would go to Brampton, would be to see the commish.
Well, now that you mention Brampton, as soon as you mentioned it before, I thought of Stan Butler right away, whose name is synonymous with the battalion organization. And that's probably a story, Sunaya, of a team that was really damn good that didn't quite make it over the hump. But Chris and I caught Stan, I think, I don't know if it was a weak moment or just the right time of day when we were in North Bay a couple of years back, and we got a real nice amount of time to sit down, and Stan was just in a very talkative mood. What are your memories of covering him and dealing with him?
Yeah, Stan was always good. We always had a good relationship. I think it was difficult in Brampton given their arena situation. I think that was always never going to work. And I think the OHL made such a big mistake in expanding, when they expanded in the GTA, of putting those two teams, 5 kilometers apart in Mississauga and in Brampton. I think if maybe they had rethought that and just had one kind of Peel region team, they would have found success in that area. But that was just kind of sad, especially when they eventually moved to North Bay. I know they had some really great diehard fans in Brampton. And so that was kind of sad to see them go.
I'm going to ask you a question I've asked others on this podcast, and Mike and I have talked about it at length. Do you think the OHL needs a team in the GTA?
Do they need a team in the GTA? I would say yes, but is it viable in the GTA? I don't think so. I think those are two very different things. I think, from the standpoint of having kind of like that marquee of being in the GTA would be nice for the league, but given the amount of other things going on, junior hockey is a tough sell in the GTA, as we've seen over the years and over the number of teams that have been here. It's been hard. You need deep pocket owners, that's for sure.
We see it in Mississauga every season. I think the most attendance we saw was during that snow game, Mike.
Yeah, that's
Remember?
right.
All the kids were off, and parents still brought them to the rink because they were counting on them being at the game.
You know, we talk about covering this game, and you do it. And Sunaya, you talked about how you kind of fell in love with the game as a kid, watching the OHL Game of the Week on Saturday afternoons. And listen, it's a great gig, but there's not a ton of glamour. Like when you go into these rinks, and that's fine, but when you go to these rinks, the media room might be an old dressing room. The press box, if there is one, might or might not in the modern day have Wi-Fi, or if you're in Owen Sound, you're lucky to get any kind of internet signal where we are in the booth. What were some of your experiences being in a building trying to do your job given the conditions that we sometimes encounter?
Oh my God, it was like archaic. Like when you think about it now, I spent a lot of time covering hockey in the old St. Mike's Arena, which was not an OHL facility. It's a nice rink. It's a great community rink. It's a great like high school hockey rink. It's perfect for that. But for the OHL, no. Like there was no press box. It was like a metal scaffolding that you sat on, and like for the print media. I think you guys, the broadcast media, were in the center, like at the where the face-off circle would be, at the center of the rink, and we were in a corner, and it was a scaffolding that you had to like climb up. It was like a ladder. It wasn't even stairs. It was like a ladder that you had to climb up and like kind of contort your body to get into. And before they had the netting up, like that was like a death trap in the pregame warm-up, because like pucks would be flying up there and you couldn't really see if you weren't paying attention. Like it was pretty dangerous. And I remember one time before they had the nets up, the Oshawa Generals came to town, and Nathan Horton in the pregame warm-up ripped one off of the crossbar, and it came up to where I had a hot chocolate in a styrofoam cup. It hit the hot chocolate and it literally exploded. And I was like not happy. And all I could hear was, sorry, from the ice level.
That's brutal.
It was awful. But that was also the press box where they once had a raccoon in the press box during like before in the pregame. I remember I was coming down early in the OHL. If you go like 90 minutes before a game, like you can go and interview people if you need them. And I was doing a story on Cody Bass, who was playing for the Ice Dogs at the time. And as I was walking around the concourse, I saw the Majors PR guy, and he kind of stopped me and he said, whatever you do, don't go into the press box because there's a raccoon there. And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, we've called animal services, but they're not here yet. So whatever you do, don't go up there because it's like angry, and we don't want it to move because then we won't know like where it goes. So I was like, okay, fine. And so I find Cody Bass, we're at the bottom, like at rink level. And St. Mike's, if you haven't been there, it's a very small arena. It's not like one of these modern arenas. You can pretty much see everything from any angle. And so I'm interviewing Cody Bass, and the way I'm facing, I can see the press box where the raccoon is. And so by now, Animal Services has come, and I can see them trying to pin this raccoon in and try and get him in this cage that they've brought. And all of a sudden, the raccoon breaks free and like jumps up onto the netting, and I'm like, oh. And so we had to stop the interview, and like Cody like turned around, and we're both watching like animal services trying to corral this raccoon before the game starts. And so eventually they got it, and they took the raccoon out of our press box. But yeah, I mean, that was almost like a regular occurrence at St. Mike's. Like they would lose power all the time. Like one time they lost power because like a squirrel had chewed through like some lines and stuff like that. So they had to reschedule. They had to reschedule a game. We used to do our interviews in, we called it the boiler room. And like, I think that's what it was, because it was like extremely hot in that room. And so it was just like this room where they had like all this kind of machinery in there. And like, when I first started, like the internet was over phone lines. And so they only had 2 phone lines that we could use in the whole rink for like maybe 4 or 5 reporters. And so one of the phone lines was just hanging from the ceiling, like near the Zamboni entrance. So like you would have to like hold your computer and have it connected to this like phone jack in the ceiling while you were uploading your story, and like make sure you don't get run over by the Zamboni like while you're doing that. So.
See, I wasn't that far off before. When I talked 20 years, people don't realize 25 years ago, the internet was barely a thing. Okay. You had to plug it into the wall, people. That's what happened to folks like Sunaya and I.
That raccoon was probably scared because he saw a bass at ice level. I'm sorry. I am sorry. I take that back.
You should.
That's bad. You mentioned the internet just getting underway. I think enough time has passed that we can say that you were one of the people behind Loose Pucks. Is that fair? Yeah. Okay. What was it like trying to, because I remember following Loose Pucks and being like, these guys know trades before they're going to happen. These guys are so connected. How challenging was it back then to get the information that you were quote unquote breaking?
It was so much fun. I would go down to Sarnia, and I would go to Terry's house, Terry Doyle, we did Loose Pucks together. And we would just sit in his like office basement and like be calling and texting people like constantly. But it was great. It was so much fun. I really enjoyed trade deadline. I remember, I think it was, well, actually I shouldn't say who it was, but like they would always get angry because I would be like calling while they were trying to get a deal done. So they'd be like, I promise, like you will be the first person I tell as soon as it's done, but don't call me for like another 2 minutes. So yeah, it was so much fun. It was a lot of fun.
That makes me think back to when you were telling the story earlier. We were talking about the players' off-season jobs, and Liam Maskant and Ray Heater are sending you pictures of what they were doing. And, you know, you're talking to a GM who's in the midst of a deal. Did you find, Sunaya, because I'm not so sure anymore, that they were willing, they want the coverage, they're interested in having somebody ask about the things that they're doing? Because I'm starting to think it's less like that now than perhaps it used to be, but I could be wrong.
I think it is, only because I don't think the coverage is the same anymore. You know what I mean? Like there aren't, like, are there many or any major newspapers covering the league now? Like the Star, the Sun, there used to be regular coverage in the Star and the Sun. Like I remember the Canadian Press used to send someone to like every game, and that's kind of been dialed back too. And I think it's just pretty much local coverage now. It's not so much one person, you know, doing the entire league and kind of having that overview of everything versus just one beat person just looking after their own team. And I mean, even some of the local coverage has been diminished over the years. I think the teams that still have local coverage, print coverage are very lucky. I know in Kitchener, you're so lucky to have Josh. He does such a great job with the Rangers.
You've obviously covered a lot of fun stories in this league, but you've also covered some of the black eyes, if you will, this league has. We won't get into them, but from like hazing to player recruitment to draft manipulation and stuff. Did you ever get any, or did you ever feel any negative backlash from the league after covering some of those?
Not so much from the league, I don't think, but I remember the first time, like from the league talking, when I say the league, I mean like from Ted Baker or David Branch, like the actual OHL. But I remember the first time I ever wrote about Don Cherry not being a good coach when he was coaching the Mississauga Ice Dogs. That was the first time I really, like, people were angry, and there were like other people. It was strange because there were some people in the league who were like, thankfully somebody finally said it, like he's not a good coach. It's kind of not even his full-time job really. And there were other people who were like, how could you do that? The man is like an icon. And so it was kind of mixed, but the backlash was really bad. Was
it worse or better than the backlash you got when you wrote the article, "It's time to say goodbye to Don Cherry," and then he was fired about 2 days later?
No, it was, I think the first time was way worse. Like it's not even comparable. Like that was really bad. Like I had, I just remember there was one general manager who I really respected, and he was pretty upset that I had written that. And so, I said, well, is it true? And there was nothing he could say, like, because it was. And so, yeah, that was a rough one. Like, and I was still, I think, not early in my career, but not super late into it either. The column I wrote about saying it's time to say goodbye to him was that was more, I think, fan backlash. He's always going to have his core audience, and that's fine. Like, you can watch and read and listen to whatever you want to. You just don't have to do it at a public broadcaster. But that backlash was mostly fan backlash, and that doesn't really bother me much anymore.
I know, Sunaya, that there's a long road still ahead for you in sports journalism, but have you ever allowed yourself the moment to look back at the trail you've blazed for other women, other racialized women in sports?
No.
Hey, well, you should.
I got a 5-year-old, and I am too busy to look back at all of that stuff. I mean, it's really cool. Like sometimes I'll think about like some of the crazy shit I've seen over the years, and I'll be like, wow, that was really crazy. But I don't actually spend a lot of time, thinking about it, or, I'm too busy worrying about what comes next. Especially in the crazy industry that we're in, there isn't too much time to stop and smell the roses.
What was going through your mind in the moments after the Oshawa Generals won the Memorial Cup, the most recent one, and you're about to walk out onto the ice, but you're also carrying child?
Yeah. So the funny thing about that is I also covered when they won the OHL final. I was also covering that, and I was also pregnant at that time, about 5 months pregnant. And so it was fine. There was no problem because, as you know, like the ice is all chewed up. It's not slippery when you're walking on it after a team has played, 20 minutes of hockey. Like there's no way you're gonna slip and fall unless there's water there and it's slippery. So it was like no problem. And so at the Memorial Cup, however, they had gone into overtime, and I think it was Anthony Cirelli. I think he scored like maybe a minute and change into overtime. And so it had just been flooded essentially, and it was slippery. It was ice. And so I had seen people wipe out who were going on the ice before me. And so I'm 5 months pregnant at the time, and I'm like, I cannot do this. Like, but I have to also do my job. Like, how am I going to do this? And so I found Fodi Soteropoulos, who was running communications for the Q at the time. And I was like, Fodi, you're going to have to help me out. Like, I don't know how I'm going to get out there because I don't want to fall, but I also have to do my job. And so he's like, okay, come on, I'll take you out. And so he brought one of his interns, and the two of them like took, one arm and helped me like shuffle out to the ice because they had carpet there. And so they kind of just planted me on the red carpet that was used for the trophy presentation. And then afterwards, it was one of the players, his nickname was the Big Rig, Hunter Smith. He went out and like did me a solid, and he was like, who do you need? And so he went out and got whoever I needed, and would like drag them over to my my little spot on the carpet, and I could interview them that way. And so that's how I was able to work. And then after it was over, one of the players helped me just get to like the penalty box where I could get out from the back door into the ice, off the ice. So it was, that was, I don't want to say fun because it was definitely not fun, but at least I got it done. So
Serena may have won a US Open pregnant, but you didn't have to walk on ice to do it.
Oh, she just walked on water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was pretty crazy. Like, I was like, how am I going to do this? Like, it was dread. Like, when they scored, that was like the first thing that popped into my mind. It was like, oh my God, how am I going to do this?
Sunaya, it's great to get this chance to catch up and share these stories. And the fact that you're still answering junior hockey guys' phone calls when you're a big shot at the Athletic is really cool of you. I want you to know.
No, anytime. Junior hockey is like my first love. It will always be my love. And so I'm always happy to talk about it, always happy to cover it.
Real quick, and sorry to interrupt. I know one last question, then we can get into how great this was.
Because of course it was great. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a big proponent, and now more than ever, I think if you see it, you can become it. How important is the Association for Women in Sport Media to you? I know you're part of that.
Really, really huge. That is something that I really believe in. I've been a member for many years now. And I think they do an amazing job of helping women navigate sports media on the journalism side, but also on the PR side and beyond. And I think, more organizations like that have been really instrumental in getting more women into the business.
And that's just going to be instrumental in getting more Sunayas onto this podcast in the months and years ahead, because that's what it's all about. Thanks again for doing this. It really has been a lot of fun.
We didn't even talk about T-Bird.
I said... I knew there had to be a reference at some point. That's all he's going to get. And I'll bring him on himself at some point.
Is he going to be on?
Yeah, we got to get him on.
He says that we have to get you. Okay, you be the judge, Sunaya. He says we have to get Crupper on first.
Why Crupper?
You tell me. This is what he keeps telling me.
So if you get T-Bird on, I don't know if you can actually use, like, if you can actually use this, but if you get him on, you're gonna have to ask him about the fight.
Oh, don't worry, I will, because I know about the fight, but nobody has come clean on the fight publicly yet.
Maybe this will be the forum.
My favorite thing about the fight is the fact that the OHL had an investigation into it.
Yes.
And it was inconclusive. Like, how do you have coaching staff from two teams involved in a brawl in which someone is injured and it's inconclusive?
It's
like,
the
code.
It's the code. It's the code of silence. Because I've been told by the actual felon
assailant?
In this case, the assailant, yes, what happened. And anyway, all we know is the wrong people might have taken the fall, but